A warm welcome to the 12th and final session in the ICC 75th Anniversary Celebration Series. Thank you for sharing a part of your evening with us. A special welcome to Mr. Bryan Lindskog, music therapist, Easter Seals, Chicagoland, and Greater Rockford. Bryan will address Songs of Success, music therapy in special education. Bryan began his post-secondary education at Illinois State University with aspirations of being a music educator. As an undergraduate student, Bryan was introduced to music therapy. Seeing a connection between music and supporting students with learning and special learning and behavioral needs, Bryan redirected his career toward music therapy. Through his internship, he discovered the power of music when working with children with different abilities and sought a career in special education as a music therapist. He has worked in special education settings for over a decade and now trains and develops educators, clinicians, and administrators. Welcome to this interactive series during which Bryan Lindskog will demonstrate the use of music therapy interventions in special education settings, specifically those serving students with autism and intellectual, emotional, and special learning differences. The session will also identify ways in which music can support students' educational and functional goals while being integrated into the classroom. Thank you for being here, and once again, welcome to all. Okay, Bryan, now you can take off from here.
Wow, I mean that's such an introduction. I think we should just close it right there and call it a night. Um, well, thank you, Paula, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to everyone who is here with us tonight. Um, yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, dive right in. Songs of success, music therapy and special ed. Paula already kind of gave a pretty good introduction to myself. So I won't spend a whole lot of time here. But like she mentioned, I have been working in the therapeutic day school environment for the last about 15 years. Originally trained as a music therapist, and have during my training, my internship really found my niche was working with individuals with learning differences and really kind of leaned into the autistic and developmentally disabled population to kind of share the gift of music and really make those connections. Oftentimes they say where words and music speaks. So that was kind of where I kind of leaned into my profession. But we'll dive right into kind of what tonight is hopefully going to provide. Um, I'm hoping to give you kind of a foundational understanding of music therapy. What is it? A lot of people have different ideas about what it can look like, and we'll explore that in just a few moments. And then we'll talk a little bit about how music can support skill development, and ultimately how I'll provide some musical examples of how I might use music to support instruction in the classroom and how it might align to some of those Common Core standards that teachers may be addressing in the classroom. So, and if there's any questions, raise a hand, let me know. It's a small group here, so, we can have more of a conversation than anything. So the first thing I like to start out with is kind of finding out what people think music therapy is. Normally, I would do kind of again, with a big group, I would do like a Mentimeter, word cloud type of activity. But I think it's kind of small enough group that if you all just want to share, kind of what you think of when you think of music therapy, if you have a sentence, if you have a word, something that kind of comes to mind and feel comfortable sharing. If you don't want to share out loud, you can also just share it in the chat and we can check it out there.
I know when I first started at Chicago Public Schools, so many, many years ago, we had a music therapist that used to come into the classroom. And um, and to me, it seemed like the primary focus was just trying to make those connections, trying to make connections to other people through music. singing songs. And this is when I taught kindergarten, first, second grade age children, and just trying to give them those, it's more like giving them social cues and social ways to interact socially through music and connect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely do that sometimes.
Mhm.
Let's see. Differentiate for all students, Christine said. Yeah, differentiation.
And Brian, one of the things that struck me as I learned more about music therapy, it's music with non-music goals. The notion that it's accomplishing goals and objectives and benchmarks, that are actually not related to, you know, um, the punctuation of music or any such thing, but other goals, objectives, and benchmarks. That was
Absolutely.
that was a wonderful clarity for me when I thought about that moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Hi,
So,
Brian.
yes.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
No.
Nope, you're good.
I'm Dan, and I work in Chicago Public School as a SICA in the classroom, and I we have some musical therapy session, and I see that besides as you mentioned, the other person, the other guest, same like me, mentioned to greet and meet everyone. I think it's a sensorial experience. It's something to bring joy and to refine a different part of sensorial part of the body of the students.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. Absolutely, all those things. It's one thing I love about my profession is like everybody has like such good things to say about it. It's not like a lawyer or, anybody like that. Um, so I do like to dive into a little bit of the history because I think a lot of people don't know much about the history of music therapy. But realistically, if you actually look into the texts of when music really started being connected to kind of medicine and health, you can look back as late as, the 400 BC, when we're looking at Aristotle and Plato and how music could impact a person's health and what made them feel better. But then you can also think that in other cultures, the health impacts of music could have been even presented even before that. So it's a very almost very early history of the impacts of music. And it wasn't actually until the 1700s that music therapy really became like a name or became kind of its own construct. And that was noted in Columbian Magazine in 1798. And then you had the 1800s where we had some dissertations where people started to explore what was kind of the research component that kind of went along with music and added some value to it. Um, and then we actually saw music therapy really come into its own in the 30s and 40s. So, you're thinking, that's World War I ends, World War II. And what people noticed is that when music was provided to veterans in the hospital, that they seemed to have better outcomes. They seemed to be, in better spirits. They seemed to actually heal a little bit faster. And so that was kind of the emergence of the music therapy profession. And in the 1940s, they started establishing educational programs across the country. Really, it was only like four or five. And then by the 1950s, we created the National Association for Music Therapy, where we developed educational standards and training requirements and focused on really the research component as to why is this meaningful? How can we measure these positive impacts that we're seeing? And then a second association was actually created simultaneously in the 70s. So the American Association for Music Therapy. Um, quick fast forward to the 80s, so we're getting a little bit more contemporary. The certification board for music therapists was created in the 80s, and that was the governing body that said music therapists should meet these levels of standards and competency before they can be considered board certified. It was also around that time that the World Federation of Music Therapy was created. So we started actually seeing the global expansion of music therapy from being just more US centered to being kind of more globally centered. By the 90s, we decided that we really didn't need two organizations, so we merged them together to become the American Music Therapy Association. If you're looking for the website, it's musictherapy.org. And now today, music therapists are employed in a variety of different locations and with a variety of different populations and settings, from hospitals, both general and psychiatric, community mental health agencies, rehab centers, again, when we talked about the VA, daycare facilities, nursing homes, schools, which is why I'm here, and private practice. So all of these places are kind of where you might find a music therapist working. And if we're going to be very specific, the definition of music therapy is an established health profession in which the music is used within a therapeutic relationship to address physical, emotional, cognitive, and social needs of individuals. You'll notice that none of the goals are musical. As Paula mentioned, that's never really the goal of the music therapist. Our goal is to use music as a tool to accomplish some non-musical functional goal. So we'll dive in a little bit more in that in the next few slides, because that's kind of always the area where people are like, well, which is it? Is it music education or music therapy? So we'll dive into that now, well, after this little video. So one of the things that has always been my philosophy is bringing fun and enjoyment into a setting increases engagement. And when you have engagement, you have participation, you have learning, you have connection. So I always like to start my presentation with this video because it really kind of captures some of what I think about when I'm thinking about my sessions. And let me know if you don't take it. Now, I obviously don't recommend you play on stairs like that, but I really think it kind of captures how, we can add music to the things we do every single day, and it automatically kind of can create new life, new engagement, new participation. And so what's the difference between music education and music therapy? Well, when we're thinking music education, our goal, as kind of Paula talked about, kind of the opposite, is to focus on those musical components. So a music educator is thinking about how a student can sing, how they can play an instrument, and how they can generally understand musical principles. So for example, the sample goal here might be understanding basic rhythm patterns. Can you differentiate between 4/4 time and 3/4 time? Can you identify different notations based on duration? And so I'm gonna try and make you guys participate in kind of like fun activities, and you can be muted, so I won't know if you are and are not. So that's cool. But for example, if I were teaching rhythm, I might use this visual as an example, where it'd be apple, banana, orange. Apple, banana, orange. And so that kind of helps a student understand those rhythms based on the types of words that they might be using. But ultimately, as a music educator, I'd be trying to see, can you see the difference between the quarter notes, the eighth note, and the half note? And are you able to kind of differentiate those different note values? If we flip over to the music therapy side, I, as a music therapist, don't really care as much about the rhythm. I don't really care about your pitch or your tone. Like in general, that's not exactly what I'm looking for, unless I am. And so really thinking about taking kind of a similar intervention, and we might be identifying different foods. Instead of note values or musical components, I'm trying to see if I have a client who maybe knows how to identify what foods they want to eat. So, can you differentiate between different red foods, or is every red food an apple? Can you increase your communication and let me know what type of food you like to eat? Are you able to increase your self-determination? Are you able to make the choices and kind of decide what you want to eat first? So I might do something like, I like to eat some pears. I like to eat, eat, eat some apples. And then I might ask, Paula, what is your favorite kind of fruit?
I'd say apple.
Oh, Paula likes to eat apples, so we like to eat, eat, eat some apples. We're gonna eat apples all day long. So Paula got to add in her little piece. We got to sing about Paula. Paula feels good because she got to add to our fruit salad. And so it really just allows for all of those different components. Paula has to listen and wait for me to kind of ask her the question. You can take it and you can expand it, which is my favorite part of music therapy, is I can be like, oh, you got this. Let's go to the next step. Okay, what are 2 red fruits that you see on our menu? Or I can switch it up and say, what is a fruit you don't like? I'm not gonna eat, eat no coconut, because some people don't like it. And so we can kind of bring in those like things that I want, also things that I don't want. So when I'm thinking of music therapy, a lot of people have this vision of music therapy as kind of like this, some people have called me magical, and they're like, oh, you're a magical. And I like to think that I'm a lot more logistical than that. So I was actually also I had a designation as a neurologic music therapist and became a neurologic music fellow. And so kind of part of our training was to kind of understand a little bit more about how the brain works. Which I'll go into in a little bit. But one of the big pieces we talked about was how we look at the services we provide. It's really easy to walk into a room, strum a guitar, and hope things go well. But I always wanted to enter with a little more purpose. So we would usually start with an assessment, just like any educator or professional therapist would, where we're looking to see where does a student need help in their functioning. So we might use something like the SEMTAP. So it's the Special Education Music Therapy Assessment Profile, lots of letters, to find out if a student really does better in a musical environment versus a non-musical environment. And we would kind of do a comparison. And usually the cutoff point is about 25%. So if a student is doing 25% better in that musical environment, we would say, yeah, that's probably a good avenue for them to kind of engage. And then based on that, we would develop goals related to that assessment. So we might say, okay, a student is really needing to be able to identify different letters, and be able to put them in order from A to Z. And so then we would kind of work with the teacher, like, what are you doing to organize the letters? Like, do you put them on a whiteboard? Do you have magnets? Do you have like a song that you sang already? Because that would be kind of where we're thinking of is like what music is involved. Um, and then the translation piece would be adding that musical component in. So that's going to add a scaffold. So if, just for all the people here on the call, if I were to say what letter comes after G, how many people started singing the alphabet song in their head? Could you hear it?
Yeah.
So it adds a scaffold so that we can remember kind of that chunk of information using that musical piece. And so then after a music therapist is like, yes, you got it, then we're like, okay, can you do it without us? So that's the transfer piece. So we're like, okay, we're not going to carry around a guitar with you for the rest of your life. So we need to transfer you back to the classroom and pull that music support away so that you can kind of do it by yourself. Also, please, if anybody needs to stop me for questions, please go for it. So neurologic music therapy is really looking at kind of the research-guided clinical part of music therapy. And it's really driven by kind of this idea of neuroscience and the idea of perception, cognition, and production of music and how that influences and changes the non-musical brain and behavior. So it's really about understanding the why. Why do we respond differently to music? Why can we remember, all the 50 states in order if we add music to it? But if we take away the music, we just don't really have that information. What concrete evidence do we have to say that music is really doing something? So it's a very data-driven model. And with that, there's a whole presentation that you could do about NMT, but I'm going to try and get to kind of the special ed piece. With NMT, they basically created these techniques. I almost think of them as like physical therapy approaches, like where you would, refer or prescribe that a client do X, Y, or Z. And so you have all of these things, and they're kind of in three categories. So we have speech and language, sensory motor, and then cognition. And so those are the kind of the three main areas of the brain that NMT really thinks about. Again, I'm not going to go over each one, but I picked out like a few. So for example, if we are we're working with a student who maybe is working on some of the diction or working on how they form letters and how they pronounce letters, some of the articulation stuff. We might use oral motor and respiratory exercises. It's a lot of letters and a lot of words. But what it's basically trying to do is using music to help you work those pieces of your mouth. So maybe we have a student who is working on B's, the sound but. And so has anybody heard the song If All the Raindrops? If all the raindrops were? No? Well, fine, I'll get my guitar. So if we're going to work on the B sounds, our raindrops are going to be blueberries and broccoli. And we might go, if all the raindrops were blueberries and broccoli, oh, what a rain that would be. We'd be standing outside with our mouths open wide like ba, 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 ba. So we're using a lot of the ba sounds with blueberries and broccoli and the ba, ba, ba. So we just get a lot of time to practice all of those sounds. And then you can change it. So maybe you need to work on C sounds like cats. So maybe it's raining cats and cows because that's ridiculous. And kids love ridiculous. So, we might be singing about all the cats and the cows and the ka, 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 ka. And so we're making all of those sounds with our throat muscles. And that tends to be really fun and exciting, and we can really work well with like our speech language pathologist friends. They're really jealous that we get to do things like that and that we come up with things like that. Other things that we might do with like sensory motor skills, the rhythmic auditory stimulation, that's basically helping our brain regulate our body. So I'm going to pull up a little example because I'm all about the here. Um, so if you want to right now, just kind of at your own house, just kind of tap your feet, just like you're walking. You're just walking around. How many of you are now in beat with the music? I see some swing automatically. So part of that rhythmic auditory stimulation is allowing us to kind of get in sync. We entrain. Oftentimes it's used with people with mobility differences to kind of help get their gait in line. And then there's cognitive. And so when you're thinking of cognitive, and the whole idea here is how we make our brain kind of go through all of those executive processing functions. Oh, I see a wave. Yep, I can wave right back. When we think of the one that I have highlighted there is a musical mnemonic training, we already did a little bit of that. But are there any pieces of information that you remember better when you have music associated besides the alphabet? Because we already did that one.
The months of the days of the month, the months and the days, 30,
Yeah,
that's absolutely helpful.
days of the week,
Yeah.
days of the week, days of the week, days of the week, days of the week. There's
Yeah.
Monday and there's Tuesday, there's Wednesday and there's Thursday, there's Friday and there's Saturday, and then there's Sunday. Like, still stuck in my head. And now I'm like an adult. But yeah, we can use music to really chunk that information so we can really remember how that goes together, what order we need to keep it in. And there's obviously lots more to learn about with neurologic music therapy. Maybe that'll be next year's topic. Um, So when we're thinking about goals in music therapy, I often think about it as kind of the glue between the different pieces. So your OT might work with gross fine motor, might work with sensory regulation. Your speech pathologist might work with communication. Your social worker is going to work kind of in that social area, maybe in recreation and leisure. And well, as a music therapist, I get to work with all of them because we can find ways to access all of them through music. Um, and so we're going to see some examples of that in a minute. We're going to watch a little video. If anybody's ever heard of Temple Grandin, she's going to be in this video for us today, doing a little demonstration with one of the people at Colorado State University, I believe.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 and 15, 16 and 17, 18, 19, 20. Excellent. Okay. All right, I think we should walk and do it.
All right.
You ready? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Stop. Get control of your body and we're going to go backwards. Oh, you know what? Let's curve around. Let's go this way. I'm going to turn you around. We're going to go forward.
Back up.
So just follow me. Just you got it.
All right, I'm going to do it.
You don't have to do it.
I don't have to back up.
You can do it. Okay, ready?
All right.
So we're just going to walk. Go and follow me. Sorry, we're going to go. You're going to go forwards.
Well, I'm going
And
to
then
go
I'm gonna
forward.
start
So you're taking me around the corner.
Yep. And stop. Backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. Switch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right. So there's a lot going on there. Did you see any goals that might have been addressed? There's also a list.
Motor planning.
Planning, huge.
Yeah. Especially when they were saying, trying to understand to go back the other way, going backwards. And yeah.
Yeah. And it almost might have been easier to just keep going and turn her around than trying to explain what she wanted her to do.
Right.
We had crossing midline. We had starting, we had stopping. We had probably some cooperative play because you have to kind of work with each other to kind of see where everybody's going. All right, now we have another one, a little different example. See if you can identify some of the goals you might see here. I'm training you all to be little music therapists.
March, march, march. Good. Up, down, up, down. Kick. Show me. Let go. What's number? There you go. Nice.
Good.
Up, down. Up. There you go.
All right, do we see any different goals there?
Listening, following directions.
Following directions, absolutely. And the whole part of kind of pattern sensory enhancement is you may not have heard it, but her chords would go up as she wanted the movement to go up, and the chords would come down as she wanted the movement to come down. So basically, the brain is being cued by the music to know where it needs to go next, and the body will kind of lift and release as it needs to.
Gross motor planning.
Exactly. See, you're all excellent. I'm giving you A's today. So our role as music therapists in the special ed setting is fourfold. So number one, we really want to look at generalization. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to follow all of my students around for the rest of their lives to provide them their own little life soundtrack. So I kind of have to teach them how to make up their own soundtrack in their head and kind of keep that information, all of the things that they learn. And then two is integrate it with all of the other things they're learning. So whether it's a speech goal, an occupational therapy goal, social work goal, academic goal, kind of bring those things together to help them support each other. Three, socialization, kind of the idea of having students work with other students. I don't know how many people saw Wicked, but what I do know is that so many people are singing the same song right now in my academy. Everybody's singing the same music. And what's really cool is you can hear one student start to sing and then another student starts to sing with them because they all kind of know that music. So it kind of brings together that community. And then leisure skills. How can music become recreation? With so many of our students, when they don't have anything to do, they don't know what to do. You know, you're like, oh, go have some free time. And what does that look like? So providing them with a repertoire. Do you like to dance? Do you like to listen to your favorite music on YouTube? Do you like to play an instrument? Do you like to compose your own songs and maybe you're a songwriter and you don't even know it? We have a student who wants to become an electronic music DJ. And so for his free time, he likes to find like cool little looping tracks and put them together. So what a cool opportunity if that also ends up becoming maybe something that could be a career or a vocation. All right, so that is kind of the end of section one. Section two is shorter. Any questions about section one? Great, love it. So why? Why do we care about having music therapy in special ed? You know, a lot of people think, oh, music's great, but really we need to be focusing on math, on reading, on social science. And realistically, the idea is that the creative arts and music really allow students to really explore to the fullest potential. And it really creates a supportive component to the classroom environment. What we do know is that music creates an opportunity, music and the arts create opportunities for collaboration. So when you're thinking about making music together, when you're thinking about creating that sense of community, again, like I mentioned, all the students singing Wicked together, you kind of create this collaborative environment. We do a talent show where students can kind of participate in different components of it, and so they get to collaborate together. Freedom and choice. When we think about students in the special ed environment, so much of their life is decided for them. What bus they're going to get on, what they're going to eat when they get to school, what class they're going to go to, what order they're going to go to their classes, what seat they're going to be sitting in. So the arts really creates an opportunity for that freedom and choice and autonomy and self-determination to really be able to kind of make some decisions about what they like to do. And last, it creates an alternative way to learn. I think I'm pretty confident in saying that none of us learn in exactly the same way as our peers, whether it's visual learners or auditory learners or kinesthetic learners. Music really allows for kind of that whole brain active engagement. So, as we're thinking about songs, words to a song, we're processing the words, but we're also processing the sound, and we're also processing the harmony, and we're also processing the emotional meaning that may be in the harmonies. All of that kind of comes together to really activate the whole brain. And so what you're going to see with that is you're going to see improved academic performance because students have higher self-esteem. They have more creativity to think outside the box and problem solve. They're better able to use kind of all of those pieces of their cognitive development. We talked about kind of those pieces of NMT that support that cognitive development. It's also a more collaborative learning environment. They're able to learn from other people besides themselves. They're able to share information in a nonverbal way. So, if they're playing, the drum and they are just whacking it as hard as they can, and we can talk about, oh man, it looks like Jimmy's feeling real mad. And then, Johnny can show that he's actually not feeling mad. Maybe he's feeling sad. And so we can kind of work through some of those things without necessarily those words that have to go with them for maybe our students who are non-speaking. All right, the meat and potatoes, you finally arrived. How are we going to use music in the classroom? And so this area of focus kind of breaks down kind of four main areas, looking at elementary intermediate classrooms, looking at a secondary and a post-secondary classroom goal, looking at a potential speech therapy goal, occupational therapy, and how we kind of use music to kind of support those areas. So for those educators, Common Core standards are just a really fun thing to use. I'm sure. And so when I'm looking at, Common Core standards, I look at where can I connect? How can I be supportive of kind of that learning in the classroom? And so I might look at something like this, and I might say, okay, let's see. What is something that I think everybody is going to know a little something about? And it is Taylor Swift. Whether you love her or you hate her, you're going to know something about her. So I might pull up a song. We might listen to the lyrics. I won't force you to listen to the entire song. So what we might use is we might think about, okay, what's going on in that song? Who are we talking about? How do you think they're feeling right now? Do you think they're feeling great? Maybe we would talk about how their feelings change from the beginning of the song to the end of the song. It sounds like at the beginning, maybe they're like longing, and then in the middle they're kind of sad because she thinks he's not coming, and then all of a sudden we're overjoyed because actually we're getting married or what have you. And so can we talk about all of those things that what type of conflict resolution and all of those pieces can be explored through the lyrics of a song that students are already really interested and engaged with, is like, oh, I'm doing work? Really? So that's kind of a fun example that my group has really enjoyed. And you could break down the lyrics also then, and so I'll have some students do like a Taylor Swift rewrite where they're like, okay, you have this, let's rewrite it, let's change the song. What if it went differently, and what would that look like? And they get to kind of add in their piece of the story that maybe is more relevant to what they're going through. Um, Here is a post-secondary goal, so initiating and participating effectively in a range of collaborative discussions with diverse partners on 9th to 10th grade topics, texts, and issues, building on others' ideas and expressing their own. And so for this one, it's how do artists create narratives? And so this is a little sample of Peter and the Wolf, if you've heard of it.
This is the story of Peter and the Wolf. Each character in this tale is going to be represented by a different instrument of the orchestra. Peter, by the strings.
So we might start with something like that. We might talk about how David Bowie is the narrator, and wow, isn't that kind of cool, kind of interesting? Do you know who David Bowie is? We might take this as like, oh, can we compare this to, we might read the book about it and see how is it like different when you listen to it versus when you read it? Can you hear it differently? Do you think that those are the right characters or the right instruments that you would use in your orchestra? And why? Like what makes it different? So kind of really talking about how we can look at pieces of work differently and how we can have kind of those discussions with other peers who may have differing opinions. Moving into kind of the speech and language realm, one of the things that I often like to do is add my theatrical side, because I have a little bit of that too, that I like to bring to it. And so when I'm thinking about speech and language, I might also be thinking about social emotional literacy. So identifying emotions based on like different visuals or different perspectives. So I might, have this song. I've got a feeling inside of me. I've got a feeling inside of me. How do you think that feeling goes? So I might ask the students to identify, what does that feeling look like? Would theirs feel the same? Musical drama. And then I would usually have the students do their example. So they then get to act out for us. So I might say, Paula's got a feeling inside of her and it goes like this. And Miss Paula would get to act out however she was feeling in that moment with that musical cue. And then I would try to match her with my guitar to see if I could identify the feeling that she was feeling. And kids love when they tell you you're wrong. So obviously I would be wrong first, because they, that's their favorite part is Mr. Bryan's wrong. And then moving into occupational therapy, always thinking about with occupational therapy, so much of it is kind of this organization of task and kind of the executive functioning piece. So how do we put things in order? So in this particular goal, it's a 6-step hand washing procedure. And so what I would probably do with a teacher that I've done before is pairing it with like a literacy example. So we read this book about washing your hands, and then we turned it into a sequencing song that was used with the Farmer in the Dells, kind of the model. So I'm gonna wash my hands, I'm gonna wash my hands. Gotta go to the bathroom because I'm gonna wash my hands. And then you would go through the steps, turning on the water, turning on the water. I've gotta wash my hands, I'm turning on the water. Like you would slowly build out more and more and more until you had the whole sequence of the experience that a student would be able to do then hopefully on their own. Paula, just for clarification, it is an hour, right?
Yes, it's 1 hour, Brian. It's much too short, isn't it?
No, I'm just like, I'm almost to the end and I don't want to like
Oh no,
run
you're
out of time.
doing great. You're doing great. And it'll be fun to have a little bit of time at the end if anybody wants to kind of, I'm sure people are having all kinds of thoughts and ideas as we hear and listen here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last piece that I like to do, with um, again, students who just have those learning differences, one of the things that they often miss out on is a lot of those community experiences, and getting to go out and, explore. Luckily, we're close to Chicago, so there is so much to see and do. For some of our students, we would do mural walks where students would go and find a mural that they connected with. They would talk about the artist, they would talk about the colors, they would almost do like a mini research project about it. We have students who went to Millennium Park and they got to hear the Chicago Symphony Orchestra doing a warm up for their concert that evening, and really got to experience classical music live in the park. So really kind of finding those experiences where students can connect with art and music in a real community way. This is just kind of the source that I used for the arts integration piece, in case you're curious. My shameless plug, speak to your district about adding music therapy as a related service. Feel free to visit musictherapy.org for more information about the profession. And Q&A. See, I knew it was right towards the end. Any questions?
Thank you very much. That was really a wonderful, quick and wonderful. I
Good,
really, I
good.
really enjoyed it. I got a lot of information from it. We have I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head, but we have an organization here in Chicago that comes into like my low incident cluster classroom. Like last semester we had art, now we're having drama therapy, but they also have a music therapy component that they do as they rotate through those. So it's really kind of how they bring all three of those together. We have
Uh-huh.
art therapy, now we're in drama therapy, and then we'll have our music therapy. And they all kind of are on the same principles. It's not about drama. It's about, or the art's not about necessarily the art. It's about, the connections and the skills and those types of things, just like music therapy. It's like all three of them. So it's really wonderful.
Exactly. And with that, you can kind of connect on students who have different interests or, really resonate with certain pieces of, each creative art kind of has its lovers and it's not so much lovers.
Right.
And so you kind of get to connect with those pieces of creative arts that might be more beneficial.
But I think we'll end our recording at this point and then we'll just